Good afternoon, everyone. Please stand. Welcome again to the Cade Museum for this meeting of the Rotary Club of Gainesville this Tuesday, May 16th. I'm Tom Collette, your Sergeant at Arms. Please silence your cell phones. Guests and visiting Rotarians joining us virtually, please identify yourself in the chat. And if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, register your participation, send us an email, info@rotarygainesville.org. Pete is out for the next 2 weeks, so you're stuck with me singing. Oh, I thought you'd be cheering. Thank you. Today we'll sing God Bless America. Are you ready? God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now please remain standing for our invocation, today offered by Lori Vidal.
Let's pray together. I'm reminded of the imagery presenting a quality of life at its very best, placed before us using a picture of the river of the water of life as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God down the middle of the great street of the city. What an amazing description of a life characterized by a water quality that could be described in that way in the very center of our lives. We live in such a place. We are so thankful for the opportunity to live in a location where we can go any direction and be enjoying beautiful fresh water springs. Thank you for those given the responsibility to guard our water supply that is at the very core of maintaining our good health. We treasure this special place where we live. We pray for the protection of this great natural resource. Bless our time together now around these tables as we continue to exercise the dynamic of service above self in our community. I pray in your holy name. Amen.
You may be seated. Unless you're visiting with us today, then we ask that you please remain standing.
Hello, fellow Rotarians. My name is Eric Godet. I have the honor of introducing Mabel Baker. Mabel is the director of the Santa Fe College Blunt Center. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jacob Rush. I'm a visiting Rotarian from the Monday Club. I am the general counsel at the Alachua County Sheriff's Office, and I brought with me a guest, Major Lance Yeager. And hiding over there is another one of my club members, Harvey Baxter. He elected not to stand up, but he's visiting us too. Major Yeager.
As Jake mentioned, Lance Yeager, Major, Alachua County Sheriff's Office. I am Sheriff Clovis Watson Jr.'s Chief of Staff, Alachua County Sheriff's Office. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to our visitors and our visiting Rotarians. Good to see you, Harvey. You had a tough week last week, though, didn't you? Okay. And Eric Godet was so fast with the microphone, I didn't even get the opportunity to tell you that filling in today for Jason Shank with the microphone was Guy Jopling. Let's give him a nice hand, everybody. We do now have a series of announcements for the betterment of the membership. First announcement, Randy Caton.
Thank you. I think you've already heard, and I'm going to tell you again about our latest donation project. It's a win-win situation. We'll help the people that come to Helping Hands Clinic as clients, and we'll make our significant other very happy by cleaning out our closets and our shoe closet and bringing them here. And I forgot when we're starting, but I think that's known. I would encourage you to take a look at this wonderful poster board over here talking about the various services the clinic provides, many of which I did not even know myself. The Helping Hands Clinic started many decades ago and is ongoing thanks to good leadership. And I would appreciate your cooperation. I have some skinny pants in my closet that are totally hopeless. They're going to come. I have some very nice running shoes that are slightly worn because I gave up running, talk about decades ago. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me and for being here today, and think about cleaning out those closets.
Thank you, Dr. Caton. Up next, Ryan Thompson.
I have just a short clip. We're just going to play about 2.5 minutes, maybe. It's a special that WUFT did on Rebuilding Together, North Central Florida.
Florida Trail Association is a membership-based organization that maintains, builds, and protects the Florida National Scenic Trail, which is one of 11 national scenic trails in the country. Our volunteers are spread out throughout the state. We're organized into 19 chapters. Out of those chapters, they're assigned a section of the Florida National Scenic Trail to maintain. The Florida Trail is a 1,500-mile trail that stretches from Big Cypress National Preserve in the south of Florida all the way over to the Western Panhandle and Gulf Islands National Seashore.
The Florida Trail Association's mission is to build, maintain, and protect the Florida National Scenic Trail alongside our volunteers and our partners, mainly the Forest Service. The Florida Trail connects some of the most biodiverse regions of the state, some of the most beautiful landscapes in the country. The Florida Trail spans across 3 national forests, 9 wildlife management areas, 8 state forests, 8 state parks, 5 water management areas, 1 national wildlife refuge, 2 national park service properties, and an Air Force base. The Florida Trail also has permission to cross a number of private properties, and we thought we had partnerships with those landowners across our entire state and is contained all within the state of Florida. It's a really important natural resource because it connects those really vital spaces.
Because a neighborhood is more than just houses and streets. For more than 40 years, as a leading national nonprofit in safe and healthy housing, we've been bringing people together to rebuild homes. And so much more. We're rebuilding pride by repairing and rehabilitating the houses of veterans, people with disabilities, and low-income homeowners so they can remain our neighbors. We're rebuilding communities by strengthening their foundations. Because a neighborhood is more than just houses and streets. It's familiar faces, helping hands, and open arms. And we're rebuilding the future of our historic cities by renewing the hopes of the people who call them home. Our vision is a safe and healthy home for every person. With almost 100,000 volunteers, our local affiliates complete nearly 10,000 rebuild projects across the U.S. each year. And we hope you'll join us on the next one.
So Rebuilding Together North Central Florida has been an organization that our club supported for at least the last 10, maybe 15 years. both as a sponsor of theirs and through volunteer work. Every spring we do a project with them. We have one coming up. Greg mentioned it last week. The date we have is May 27th. I know that that's Memorial Day weekend. So we're trying to schedule another one after that as well. But we'd like to we've committed to the 27th. We'd like to get as many people out there as we can. So if you are available, it would mean a lot to us. The types of projects that we do range from painting to replacing siding on a home. Last year, we installed a French drain that was really cool. I can help anybody do a French drain now. So it's really neat to learn a new task and help a family that's in need. Typically, they're elderly and on fixed income or low-income families. And the work is so meaningful because it really allows them to stay in their homes. And if you're available, I don't want to forget to mention this. Tomorrow night, they're doing a happy hour from 5 to 7 at Cypress and Grove. So that'll be a fun little get-together if you're available. But mark your calendars for May 27th and possibly June 3rd. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Our last announcement presented today, Guy Jopling.
Good afternoon. So Greg asked me to come today and talk about the district conference that was held this past weekend. I attended the district conference for the first time. I don't know what possessed me to sign up and to go, but I'm extremely thankful that I did. I've never been there before, and the weekend was absolutely amazing. We had a lot of very inspirational speakers, including one of our own, Jacob. So it was an amazing event. I want to tell you two takeaways that I had from the event. The number one takeaway was just the amazing impact that Rotary has in the world. You know, we talk a lot about our local projects here and the things that we do here locally, but the world impact is truly amazing. The second thing that I took away is that being a member of Rotary is a great responsibility, and that it's not a spectator sport. The most impact we can make is by getting involved. Showing up on lunches to have fellowship is great every week, but getting out in the community, doing the projects, going to the events, that's where the impact really truly comes from. So I highly recommend that for those of you that have ever thought about it, or those of you like myself that had never thought about it, please consider attending next year. It's going to be in Jacksonville. Obviously, next year there will be a lot more announcements to come. But the event is not just for board of directors or presidents-elect. It's for every member of Rotary in our district, and it's truly a remarkable experience. So definitely check it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guy. We now turn the meeting over to your president, Greg Young.
Good job. Thank you, Tom. Guy, I couldn't agree with you more. That was well said. That is the impact. That's where Rotary makes the impact. Meetings are great. We have our fellowship, our networking. It's a very important part of Rotary. However, there's a whole nother world of Rotary if you want to get involved in that. So I would highly encourage that. The guy said it so well. It's great to see everyone here today. By the way, Mabel, I want to thank you. And you're a new member voted on recently at the board. So Mabel, welcome as a new member, please. Also, there's a couple of other members that are new. Sam, if you would stand up, please. And thank you, Sam. And Nathan, I saw you come in. Didn't see where you said. Nathan is a new member. So please make an effort to say hello to them and make them feel welcome as new members of our club. So thank you. I also want to make a quick announcement. Linda Reinhardt would like to get members of our club any pictures you might have of Rotary this year or maybe even beyond in the past. She's trying to bring together a collection of photos of our club during our activities and our fellowships. So please, if you have some of those, please forward them to Linda. I'm not sure if she's the clearinghouse, but I think, is that correct, Linda, to you? Okay, Linda Reinhardt's, look for the email from Linda Reinhardt, and you can respond to that with pictures. Guy, you did a great job. I want to thank Guy and Linda Reinhardt, Jacob Atim, and John Bruner and myself attended this past Friday, Saturday. I strongly encourage you to be involved in that if you can. I know it doesn't fit everybody's schedule and time of life, but if it does, I highly recommend it. I want to say also, Guy, I learned something new about you in the last month or so. You're actually the nephew of John Joplin, who's been a member of our club for a number of years. Oh, that's a secret, family secret. Sorry about that. And anyway, you joined Rotary in 2012 and in St. Johns County, moved here in 2020, and you've been an active member of our club since. So, Guy, thank you so much and welcome aboard. Also, I want to mention something else that I was going to say something about Wilbur and his father. Unfortunately, his father couldn't be here today, but hopefully he'll be here next week. But I had something for Wilbur that I was going to return to him. It's your growler, okay, from Swamphead. Okay. We had a little beer left over after the feast after the feast, and we didn't want to see it go to waste. So Wilbur was nice enough to fill those up for all of us. So let's see, at the conference this past Saturday, Jacob Tim spoke on Saturday as one of our speakers to the full house, and his story of overcoming adversity and beginning a clinic in South Sudan, the healthcare clinic there, which provides child and maternal health in Juba, South Sudan, was very inspiring to the crowd. Recently, the district, and Jeff Michaelman, our district governor, called for clubs to support the work of the clinic in Juba by sending donations to the York Foundation at the district. This request came because of the conflict that's occurring in North Sudan that is impacting people there moving down into Southern Sudan, where the clinic in Juba is, that's serving particularly child and maternal health. So after Jacob's talk, our district governor reiterated his request that I just mentioned and also announced that the district would be putting up $5,000 from within the district towards the effort. At that time, an individual in the crowd, a member of Rotary, also donated another $5,000 to match that. So there's $10,000 in the pot right now that's going to go help people coming out of it's a refugee crisis right now, humanitarian crisis. So just want you to be aware of that. There'll be an email coming out to you of how to give to the York Foundation if you so choose. And you'll be hearing more about that later. And actually our club might have some funds in our disaster relief, in humanitarian relief, that we may release to go to that effort as well. So, by the way, Jacob, stand up please. And he did a great job at the conference. He got a standing ovation. So. Good job, good job. Okay, I think now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Tom Kay. He's been the executive director of the Alachua Conservation Trust for the last 10 years. During his tenure, he has greatly expanded the reach of ACT. Many of you in the room know him and his work, and the work of the ACT and his staff. Although Tom and his wife are raising a young family, he works tirelessly to serve the staff and its stakeholders. Tom's wife, who's busy herself, practices in ophthalmologic solutions for genetic conditions. She partners with Tom to raise a family of 4 young children who are all under 10. Tom has served on the boards of the directors of Friends of Paynes Prairie and several other conservation boards. Please welcome Tom Kay to the lectern.
Well, I'd say our prayer was a good segue for my discussion today. So I appreciate that in the discussion on the River of Life. We're going to get our presentation going here. Well, thank you all for coming today. I have, let's see if this is working. It does if you turn it on. And I have to say, it's one of those things where you realize, if you plan to fail to plan, when your computer does not work when you start it up this morning. So I did take an old trick that I had from when I was back in my law days where my IT guy said, if it doesn't work, throw it in the freezer. And I did. I threw my computer in the freezer for 30 minutes. I pulled it back up and it turned on. So say that. I was saying a lot of prayers this morning, though, let me tell you. So real quickly, I always throw this slide up to give you an idea of where we work. Our name's a bit of a misnomer. We work in an area much larger than just Alachua County, and we're not the government. We often get that question. Are you the government? No, we're not a government. We're a nonprofit organization. That's our primary working area, but we actually have projects as far west as Okaloosa County, as far south as Monroe County down in Big Pine Key. I'm working on different land conservation tools, so that gives you an idea. And today, when we think about, hopefully my slides working here. Is it kicking? Let me. See? Hey, at least I had something, right? Or it was going to be me up here without this thing for a little bit. That's right. There we go. So oftentimes when we think about conservation, we think about our national parks, our state parks, places like this, beautiful spaces that have a lot of meaning to us for one reason or another, whether it's something nostalgic or someplace that we just like to go to because it brings us someplace closer that's sacred to us. And sometimes we think of places that are, I'll skip one right there, of our wildlife that we love, but it's more than that. Conservation is more than just that. It's more than just places to recreate, like the Gainesville-Hawthorne Trail, or places to sit with our loved ones and watch wildlife, or just contemplate life in general. It's more than some place to just go recreate on the water, although that's a lot of fun. I enjoy that a lot. It's more than some places to plant trees or to burn, because that's helpful to our environment as well, especially in this part of north central Florida. It's some place to educate our little ones, but it's more than that as well. And it's more than just a place for Florida's last crop, which is development. And we often talk about the fact that we're not opposed to development. We work with it quite a bit, but trying to make sure we have certain places that are in place. And the biggest reason for that, and why I'm here today, is to talk about clean water, clean drinking water. And that's one of the focal points of our organization, the work we're doing. And it's changed a lot over the last couple of decades as we've had more and more people moving to Florida. And there's been more of a push on our water resources, not only from a use standpoint, but also for the quality of that standpoint. So it really comes down to drinking water. And so I think I noted at the outset, we do three main things as an organization, primarily on the conservation side. We'll buy lands outright. Sometimes we turn them into nature preserves that we own. Sometimes we buy them and sell them to places like the state for becoming part of Paynes Prairie or San Velasco State Park. A lot of the additions to those places were done by ACT. In some cases, we work with private landowners in the farming community to keep that land in agricultural use and give up those development rights so we can continue to have that, keep that rural way of life, and ensure that it's not become something more intensive like that picture behind me. And the third thing we do is sometimes work with landowners that just donate their property outright. Sometimes they leave it to us in their will. Sometimes they give it to us during their lifetime with the ability to use it for the rest of that remaining time, and then it goes to us when they pass. Those are sort of the three main components of what we're doing on an acquisition side. And what I want to talk today about, because probably a lot of people, I see a lot of faces out here that I know, I want to talk about two different novel projects that we've been working on in light of the fact that regulation is not the most beloved thing in the world, and it has its issues too, right? A lot of issues with regulation. Sometimes people just don't like regulation. They don't want government intrusion. But there's more to it than that. We work a lot with government agencies, and one of the big issues is even once you put a regulation in place, someone has to monitor it, someone has to enforce it, and there's a lot of issues with that. So that's not necessarily the best way to approach those things. And so one of the things we've been trying to work with over the last several years with a number of different government agencies, including the Water Management District, the Florida Department of Agricultural Consumer Services, and a number of other municipalities, public utilities, is different tools that we can use to help conserve water without necessarily having to buy the land up or just, even put it into a conservation easement per se as a way of doing that. And so one of the things we're doing right now is working with farmers who are using things like this. Anybody know what that is? A center pivot irrigation. Pretty intensive use of water, and a lot of the use in our region where we're very dependent on the springs and our water systems for our drinking water is center pivot irrigation. A lot of it's used for corn and soy, so it's ultimately not ended up on our plates. It's usually, well, it does indirectly, right? It ends up in a cow or a pig or something else, and then it may end up on our plates. But it's not ended up directly for us, or it's turned into ethanol to be turned into gas, and it's really inefficient, particularly in this part of the state of Florida. It's probably not the best place to be growing a lot of those resources, especially close to like the Santa Fe River, the Suwannee River. And so what we're trying to do is work with farmers in this scenario and put them into something that's less intensive use of the property. And so we've been working with Water Management District on a project called Accelerating Suwannee for the last 5 years, where we're trying to take people farming like this and turn into something like that. So trying to turn into something less intensive Some people will say, well, there's cows, therefore there's manure. There might be issues with that. But the nitrogen usage on a cow-calf operation, particularly at a low level, is much less than what you might be using on a cornfield using center pivot irrigation. So less water, less nitrogen. And so what we've created through this program called Accelerating Swanee is sort of two different tools. One is sort of pretty traditional, where someone might put a conservation easement on the property and then say that they're going to, do some down-intensive use of the property. So maybe they're running head of cattle at a very high number and reduce that number, and then permanently protecting that property. That's a pretty traditional tool. But the one that we're working on right now, it's sort of a little differently, is basically a term-limited funding source where people are being paid to convert their property from center pivot irrigation to something less intensive. So maybe they're going to a cow-calf operation, maybe they're going to a rotation of watermelons instead of just corn and soybeans all the time, or peanuts, or maybe they're switching to forest. And so they're actually getting paid for a term of years, basically 10 years, to make that conversion from something that's very intensive. And we've identified properties where it's really high recharge, so the water's coming through the ground, perking pretty quickly into the ground, and we're trying to avoid all that nitrogen coming in and end up in our springs and causing algae blooms and the other issues that we see that unfortunately have been populating our news stories in Florida on an environmental standpoint for the last several years. So trying to get to a less intensive use and paying them for doing that. So they're getting paid for a number of years to basically shut those things down. And the interesting thing is, we were like, well, what do you do with the center pivot irrigation? Those things are worth a lot of money. The catch, though, of course, is the way how government works sometimes, we'll end up in a scenario where those things have less value than they would if they were brand new, and you don't get the cost share that you might with the federal government. So we're leaving them in place because we don't want to take the problem out there and then have them sell it and send it even up into South Georgia. It's also pulling from the same aquifer that we are, particularly on the Swanee River there. So the potential impact is less if it was up there in South Georgia, but it still has an impact on our water system. So trying to change that use and turn it into something like that. So maybe getting them to a cow-calf operation or into a forest situation, so that in that scenario, at least there's less nitrogen ended up in our system and less pollution into the springs, so that we have cleaner water to drink. A second one that we're trying to work on is with this one's pretty novel right now. We're trying to do something called an aquifer recharge fund. And so the idea here is that you have large consumers of water in our communities, primarily public utilities that use a lot of water, and they've got requirements and regulations on about how they make that up. The traditional way of dealing with that, when you you only have so much water you can pull from your aquifer, and there's caps on it. Jacksonville's dealing with this problem more than we are, but it's coming to us. All you got to do is watch the news to realize that's happening. And trying to figure out a way to reduce that without doing the traditional ways, which is usually through reclamation of water or gray infrastructure, doing mitigation, doing different things that might reduce the amount of water, be able to clean that water up and put it back into the ground. And so the option that we've been working on of late with federal partners and some of the public utilities around here is this idea of aquifer recharge fund. And what does that look like? Basically, the idea is to take the picture I had previously up there, do what we call forest management for water yield. So generally speaking, I don't know if we got any timber people in here, we plant timber, if it's slash or loblolly in our area, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 to 1,100, sometimes even 1,200 trees per acre. And we call that, it's a lot of straws in the ground, right? There's a lot of straws in the ground, and that's pulling water as well. And so the idea is to pay landowners to reduce their stands to, say, 150 or 200 trees per acre. And that difference in that water is that water yield that then those public utilities could pay for to make those conversions happen with those landowners. And so that's one of the tools we're working on right now, is trying to get landowners to buy into that idea. And there's really three ways that can happen. One, it could be that an entity, whether it's a government agency or an entity like ours, or even a utility, buys a piece of property, reduces that tree stand on the property, so therefore reducing the number of straws basically in the ground, and then putting a conservation easement on that, so taking away the development rights on it, and then reselling that property. The second option is, which is more expensive, is to buy that piece of property, do that reduction in tree stand, and then keep it in public ownership, or in the case of us, like private ownership for public use, for recreation, other components, but also getting that water yield. And the third option, again, could be just keeping the property in private ownership. So some landowner who might have a lot of land high tree density, might cut those trees again, reduce that the amount of water being consumed by those trees, and keep it that way permanently. And the landowner would sell a conservation easement, so they're getting paid for giving up that right to have more trees or more intensive use of that property. And so those are sort of two different models what we're trying to use right now that are a little bit different from the traditionally used, with all the end idea being able to make sure that we have clean water long-term for the state. In some ways, we hope more of a nature-based component rather than trying to just build our way out of it or spend a lot of money trying to do reclamation or trying to take salt water and turn it into fresh water, or reclaiming, basically water that's coming out of our systems right over here as I was driving over here, and trying to turn that back into water that we can drink. So those are sort of two different models we have. And the ultimate idea is to end up so that our springs continue to look like this. And if anyone's been around a long time, this is Sawdust Spring on the Santa Fe River. It looks beautiful right now, albeit that, probably looked even better 30 or 40 years. We continue on to look that way, so when our kids and our grandkids go to visit those places, it'll still look like that, or like that, which is Telford Spring, which is another spring we bought in the last couple of years. I'll just throw up, I'm doing pretty good on my time here, just throwing up a map. So I threw up a couple ideas of where we're working at and trying to achieve these goals. This is our primary working area up there on that map. It's pretty busy, I realize that. But want to talk about how we're approaching this in addition to some of these novel ideas and trying to get funding from the state to do this, and some of the other government agencies to try to do this, as well as private philanthropy and private public partnerships, also looking at some of the other things that are in play here. And so that first map up there was basically the conservation lands that are in our area. The second one, which is probably you've heard a lot about, got a lot of funding in this most recent legislative session. That light green is what we call the Florida Wildlife Corridor. Those properties are ones that are targeted for the purposes of moving wildlife. But if you look at where a lot of them are, they're also around a lot of where our water resources are, whether it's around the Swanee or the Withlacoochee, Steinhatchee, even going on the east side into the Orange Creek Basin. A lot of where the wildlife goes is the same places we need to protect for water resources. So while that emphasis for that funding at a state level might be on wildlife, the purpose of it and the benefit of it also has a lot to do with helping our water resources. And I'm going to throw up the last few slides, just throwing a bunch of different colors on there. This is not like some kind of psychological test for you. It has a purpose. The one there is what we call the Ocala to Osceola. That's funding that's taken from a lot of different sources, primarily the feds, along with some state funding to protect that wildlife resource. And I'll throw these up just real quick. That's surface to springs, the primary focus of that. All those little dots in there are our springs in that region, first, second, and third magnitude ones anyways. That's our forest to Gulf project. That is I don't even know what that one is. That's in Volusia County. Another one we're doing here recently. That one's not actually applied for yet. I don't think we haven't decided on the name for that one yet, but a lot of focus on water. And that last one that I always say looks kind of like some cartoon character. That's our funding that we've got for a number of projects that we're partnering with Alachua County and some of our state agencies. That blue thing to get wetlands funding from the state to protect our water resources from that perspective. The point of putting all the slides up and sharing all those different colors up there is just to kind of show the different funding sources that are being thrown at the state of Florida. And I say state of Florida, I mean collectively for all of us here to try to help protect our water resources long term so that we have ability to continue to live here and have a great place to live. I'm done with that. So I'm pretty quick. I'll take any questions you might have about those. I went through that pretty quickly.
Thank you for this presentation. It's really a wonderful effort that Alachua Trust is doing. My question is, with all the solar farms, you're taking land out of agriculture and you're also shading a lot of land. Is there any movement out there to make a combination? Like it would seem to me that fern growers would love the shade from the panels. Plus you get the extra water collected off the panels that could be guttered into a collection system. So I was just wondering if that has come across at all.
Yeah, the big focus with solar and conservation right now are twofold. One, I think we're taking, in Florida, the big concern is, if you've grown up, 75 and then across I-10, you've seen a lot of very productive agricultural lands that have been turned into solar arrays. Now, the reality is there is the potential to return it to that, but there's also anyone that's a developer in the room, and having grown up in a family as developers, I think you see a piece of property like that, and it's pretty, once you pull those solar panels off, it's pretty easy to convert it to a residential development or industrial silviculture or industrial lands or commercial properties. Pretty simple. And I think that's one of the big concerns, is that we're taking really highly productive agricultural lands in the state of Florida out of that use. To your second point, there is a lot of focus on trying to get like pollinator plants, because it's anytime you're dealing with solar, the one big concern, one big issue is you basically have to treat the same as almost like a nuclear power plant. If anyone's in utilities, they can kind of say, well, that's not totally true, but it is. You end up putting a lot of big fencing around it. It makes it sort of prohibitive for wildlife to get through. You're not really going to stop a bear or an alligator. They can climb over just about anything. But a lot of other wildlife can't get through there. But to your point, there has been a big focus on trying to get like, native ground cover in there, things that would be beneficial for our bees, butterflies, other things that are pollinators, because it would work really well out there. It could be native ground cover in there and be very beneficial. I think one of the big challenges is everyone wants things easy, right? So there's a cost to getting in natives, especially if it's been in like intensive agriculture for a long time. And two, there's the cost of just doing all that stuff versus just planting grass. But it is a good point. I mean, you could be getting a lot more out. So there's been a lot of discussion about that. And you've seen a lot in conservation across the country, really looking at like working with energy companies to site solar so that it has less of an impact on wildlife. But from a water standpoint, certainly there's going to be more recharge on a solar array than there would be on, say, houses or some other type of use.
Thank you, Tom. Great presentation. Could you talk about your funding sources and what your budget would be, annual budget approximately?
Sure. So our funding sources are pretty diverse. It used to be when I started, it was all just basically private philanthropic endeavors, so individuals and private foundations. Now our funding's really robust. I mean, we had a staff of 4. We have a staff of 23 now, so it's grown quite a bit. We've tapped into and leveraged a lot of those private dollars that we're getting in and getting funding from the state for doing some of their work, some of their acquisition work. We have the contract with the county to do their acquisition work, and getting a lot of money in from different pots of money that basically get funneled into like the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation from federal agencies, Southern Company, things like that nature that go into them and then come to us to be doing different work. So that's all said. I mean, our general operating budget right now is about $2.8 million.
Tom, thank you. Great talk. If we look at the slide showing the benefits of reduced density of trees, does that work well with a biomass plant?
Probably not. Well, I'm not going to walk into that one. But probably not, because the reality is when you're talking about those type of, the biomass plant is mostly hardwood, right? That's hardwood trees that they're primarily using for the biomass plant. So the bulk of what you're talking about doing there is like industrial silviculture. So you're talking about pine trees. It's going to be slash, loblolly, maybe even longleaf pine, where you're trying to reduce that stand. So you probably wouldn't see it nearly as much on like a bottomland hardwood forest or a hardwood forest, which is primarily what's been being used for biomass plant. I'm not saying you couldn't use pine trees. That's just not what you're seeing it used for, because the value that you're getting for those trees for biomass is so much less than what you get for a pine tree, whether it's a thinning or a cutting of it.
You said on average your budget's like $2-ish million. How much do you guys budget for acquisitions every year?
That's a completely separate pot of money. Yeah.
In the county.
Yeah. So, the county's acquisitions, roughly right now, their funding for conservation, like purchases through the wild spaces and public places, is about $12 million a year. It's about $1 million a month. That's just for the acquisition work. Obviously, wild spaces has a lot more money than that. But that pot for the county for acquisitions is about $10 million. For us on a given year, it just sort of depends. 2021 was wild. The market was going crazy. Everyone was trying to unload their property. There was a lot of like pandemic dollars, as I call them. So we ended up buying like $10 million of land, did a lot of bridge loans, bought a lot of stuff for the state, and then flipped it to them, like in holdings at River Rise Preserve State Park, an out parcel at Manatee Springs State Park. A lot of them, again, focused on water resources when we were doing that stuff, but flipping those projects, using bridge loans from the community, from individual donors to make those purchases and selling them back. Out of all those, it was about a dozen different acquisitions. Out of all those, I think we only held on to about 3 of them. The rest of them ultimately ended up with different agencies that are now managing those properties. So in a given year, just to kind of give you an idea, our budget for acquisitions on top of our general operating budget is probably anywhere from, I'd say, $2.5 million to that high into $10 million. I hope I don't get back to that level again unless somebody gives me a big amount of money, because those are a lot of sleepless nights.
Yeah, it seems like the questions go from one side to the other. Guy got his exercise in today, man. So, Tom, this is a little off the topic of your talk today, but could you talk a little bit about the Orange Lake Overlook, which is a beautiful piece of land down in Marion County, and I'm so glad to see that that's going to be preserved and we can all enjoy that piece of land.
Yeah. So that was actually that first slide I think I threw up there. That's Orange Lake Overlook. I think some of the folks know that one. That's one of those ones where I think a lot of people, you know, you talk about when you come into an organization, and it's anyone's a nonprofit or you got to do venture capital fundraising. That's kind of the project you want to land on, because a lot of people have different reasons for why they want to conserve it. Part of it, and it hits like all those things. Obviously, it sits there on top of the hill, so it has an impact on our water resources in Orange Lake. But it also has, you know, probably one of the most stunning views. Certainly not on the beach. I'd say probably the best sunrise in Florida, not on the beach, is how I always kind of frame that one. I mean, it's incredible. It has a lot of wildlife benefits, particularly for birds in that area. And so we did an acquisition with the Huff family. Anyone who remembers, it started back in the late 40s, early 50s. Buddy Huff and Ollie Huff ran the citrus shop there, and it sort of put McIntosh on the map, you know, even a little bit earlier than that, but put that on the map. And so fell out of doing it, being in Orange Grove in the 80s, and then was running cattle for a long period of time. And it's just been sort of sitting that way. So they came up on for sale, and this most likely outcome was going to be for development right there on 441. So we sort of swooped in there. Fortunately, that's one benefit of living in McIntosh. You know everybody, so as soon as that thing was about to get a for sale sign, I got a call, which was kind of nice. And we were able to conserve that piece of property, and we just bought the piece of property to the north that the Swallows family owned and had been running cattle on it for the last couple decades to expand that. So it's about 155 acres there, and it touches all the way down to the lake now and gets us to Alachua County. Thank you. Thank you.
As you know, I have a Christmas tree farm, and my concern, though, is you were saying that the farm, the regular farm, is going to be changed into cow-calf. How in the world are we going to get any food from that?
Yeah, so I think that's just one option. So that's, I mean, clearly we're not going to turn everything into a cow-calf operation. I use it as sort of one example. Some farms will be going, like we have one farm that's doing a conversion, they're going to watermelons. So clearly there's other things that they'll be growing. That's certainly just different options that people are doing. I use that as sort of one example because that, generally speaking, has a lower intensive use. You'll notice I didn't put dairy farms up there. In fact, dairy farms are one of the ones we're also trying to convert, say, from that's a pretty intensive use. And I always say a caveat that with, my family's been dairy farmers in Ireland since 1864, so I have nothing against dairy farms. But and I would get hung up if I did. But they would, you know, the reality is it's a really intensive use, particularly in certain places. So a big part of what we're talking about, just like the solar, even with agriculture, is just siting, right? Certain places are going to have more of an impact on our water resources and more likelihood that whatever they're putting into the ground to help grow those things are going to have a greater impact in some places than others. There's other places where there's not going to be any issues doing that, and some places are going to have a much more, you know, because of the way our soils are, going to have a much more big impact on our water resources.
Tom, thank you so much. I appreciate the work that you and your staff are doing to keep this part of the world and state the reason why we live here. I appreciate you coming today and spending time with us. And actually, we talked about the focus being on the water, which you did a great job of showing how land conservation and some of the techniques that the ACT is using can help serve water and to preserve water for us and future generations. So, I also want to present you with a certificate. Come on. Yes. This is showing that the Rotary Club of Gainesville will be awarding the Cade Museum as a fund for a scholarship fund for at-risk kids to attend the museum and get to learn some of the things they're doing and how innovation and what the Cade does here and how they spark wonder in young minds. So thank you. And appreciate you coming. I'm glad everyone could be here today and hear this great talk, and hope it's inspiring in terms of future thoughts about how you might want to deal with land if you have land. Also, I hope you can be here next week and join us when our speaker will be Star Bradbury, who will speak to us about navigating our parents and our own later years, all the things we have to go through, which I just learned with my mother who passed recently. So, quote, "You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today." Abraham Lincoln. Also, a little housekeeping note, if you could clean your tables before you leave, each meeting actually, I'm just thinking of it now and it's like late in the year. At each meeting, it would help so much with the people that have to take all these tablecloths, which we, members of our club, wash each week, and break down all this equipment, which we have to all do each week. So that would help us a lot if you could do that. Just, many hands make light work. So I didn't get any tickets to pull. There's no tickets in there, are there? Did we do a raffle? I didn't get any tickets to pull, but there's money. Somebody won something. Just got to figure out who won it. Yeah, usually Marcia Eubank is in charge of that. So they were kind enough to help out with that. So thank you. Thank you, guys. So the last 3 digits for the Rotary Reading Safari raffle is 495. And with that, our meeting's adjourned.